Hey folks, it's Tom, your frugal prepper. I am out here in the nice weather. I'm looking at the brakes on this Jeep Wrangler. So the customer had this in at a garage. They supposedly found their wiring had been chewed up, I think, by some rodent damage, and repaired that. It now has an oxygen sensor heater circuit error, but yeah, he's going to take it back to the garage that did the wiring repair and have them look at that. But they told him that the brakes were worn metal to metal on the back, and that they had like less than a millimeter left on the front. So he bought the brakes from Advance, got the good stuff, the Platinum Professional or whatever. But I'm looking at it and the brakes aren't bad. So I see this happen all the time. People go to a shop, they get sold brakes, and they don't need brakes. You know, brakes do get a little rusty and stuff as they get old and they wear, but they still work and stop fine. At the most, this thing might just need a little bit of cleanup and some relube on the slide pins and stuff, and slap it back together. But it probably would have been fine if they hadn't been touched for a couple more years to come at least. So I'll show you what I found. So, I mean, this thing spends a lot of time sitting, and if you just peek, you know, here through the wheel, you're going to look at this and be like, oh, it's like metal to metal, and it's really bad. The surface of this is actually still pretty smooth, and it's not really that bad. This is just from where this Jeep doesn't get driven a whole lot. It spends a lot of its life sitting. It's kind of an extra vehicle for them. And the pads on this guy still have plenty left, if you can see that there. I mean, there's years left on those pads, and the majority of your stopping force comes from the front anyway. But yeah, I mean, cleaning up the slides and cleaning up the brake hardware a little bit, lube it all up, clean off this rotor hat, and this should be just fine to continue on. There's no reason to put like $200 worth of pads and rotors on this thing when these are going to last fine. So that's what I'm going to do, is just clean this up a little bit. Actually, these slide pins are still sliding just perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with them. And we'll just, you know, there's a little bit of surface rust on the back of this pad. We'll just wire brush that off a little bit and put some ceramic on it, and just send it down the road. But I'll show you what's going on the front here too. So here's the front. I mean, this rotor is nice and smooth still. There's just not any issues with that. I mean, it's got a little wear on it, as brakes do wear. But if I peek the camera down in there, that's a little more than a millimeter. That's a good 2.5 millimeters left on that thing. Again, it will have years left on its life. I don't know why shops do this. I don't know if they don't really do a proper inspection. They're just looking. I could tell the wheels hadn't been off of it. So, in quite a while. So I don't think they actually took it apart and did a good look at it all. So, again, the rotor hat could use cleaned off a bit. And I will pull the calipers off real quick, just take a look real good at the inner pad to make sure. But it doesn't need done. This is something, you know, a shop, by the time you invest in parts and the labor that they charge, you're going to be in this like $400 or $500 probably at least, to get brakes done all the way around on this. And it doesn't need them yet, especially since, you know, if they were driving it hard every day in rush hour traffic, stop and start, maybe. While you got it here and it's torn apart, we'd replace them, but I just don't really think it's going to need them. This one looks identical in the back. But yeah, there's the Advanced stuff. They got it online, but they'll take it back at the store. So I'd say return that stuff. He did send me a text message and said don't worry about doing the front. I didn't have the back of them off yet, so I've texted him back and sent him pictures of the back brakes. And I'm just waiting to hear back, but I am sure, especially this close to Christmas, that he's just going to want to put these back together and clean them up. So again, there's just no substitute for somebody that's going to take a good honest look at your vehicle. Now if for taking this all apart and inspecting and cleaning and lubing, I'll probably still want, you know, a little bit of labor for that, but I don't like to replace parts that don't need replaced, that still have good, you know, years of trouble-free service left in them. Anyway, go ahead and start working on this. It's about like 20 degrees out here right now, so fun times. Alright, so I've got everything back together here. I've just wire brushed off everything real good, knocked off all the big chunks of rust. These slide pins were sliding just fine, so I left those alone and just put some ceramic over the brake pads and on the ears and the caliper, and made sure the ears were all, you know, cleaned off real good with the angle grinder and the whizzy pad, and so that they slide nice in there. And I just took a wire brush by hand and got up in there and cleaned the grooves out. I like the perfect one for doing those is this little spot right here on these Harbor Freight ones. We'll get right in those grooves and clean those out real good for you without having to pull the caliper brackets off. And so if I cleaned the hat off, knocked all the big chunks of rust off of that, we'll put the wheel back on, and I think that he's really is good to go. Don't forget your caliper hanging bracket, and then we're set. So I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to move over and do the other side here on the back, and that way these back brakes are serviced. The front brakes look fine. I don't even think they need a service, and then he'll be able to pick this up. Yeah, here's a look in there. There's no spacer or the center of that hub there, or axle, or it's just the lug nuts holding it centered up. Like, it's a really bad way to have a tire on your car. You hit something hard enough, you're gonna shear off the lug nuts, and you're gonna be hurting in a bad way. It's like, I don't know, like aftermarket crap is just like the worst thing you can do to your car. Anyway, I'm gonna clean up the brakes on this side. I just thought I'd show you. It's just nice big quarter, well actually more like a ½ inch gap all the way around there. Normally these come with a spacer that you put in so that it fits snug. Either somebody left the spacers out or it didn't come with them. It's one of those universal mount wheels. Junk. Wouldn't have my family driving on this crap. Alright, so one of the slide pins was hopelessly hung up on the bottom of this guy, so just seized in there. Best thing to do is just replace the caliper at that point with a rebuilt one. So that's replaced, and I'll clean this all up here and get the pads cleaned and re-lubed. Put this back on, and then as they drive it, this rust that's on the rotor from where it's just been sitting will just wear right off. There's plenty of pad left. They'll be fine for a while. So got the bleeder cracked open. I'm letting it, you know, gravity bleed, and then we'll see if it's good. If not, I'll have to have somebody come pump the brakes. So bleed it a little bit, make sure all the air's out of it, and we'll be good to go. Alright folks, so this Jeep, I got the last wheel on it here. It had a stripped lug nut and stud in the back. So I've got another one, but I was able to put the thread chaser on that, clean up the stud, put another wheel nut on it, and it torqued up just fine. But I'll recommend, like, when we get some warmer weather, you might want to bring it back, and we'll get that tore apart. I'll have to look up to see what all you got to tear into. I'm hoping you don't have to slide axles out or anything to get that wheel stud replaced. But for now, it's torqued up. It'll be fine. These wheels are just goofy. They're these, you know, aftermarket wheels, and they just don't center up correctly, and so you got to kind of get one tight and then loosen it just a little and then get another one tight and get them all centered on there, so they don't have those spacers in the middle that keep them lined up perfect. So I'm sure somebody just got the stud on there and it started to cross thread, and they were just put the impact wrench on high and said, you know. So when I took it off, it was stripped out, and little metal shavings in it. So anyway, it's good. I think the brakes are going to be fine. He can pick this up and drive it for now and bring it back this spring. We'll get that wheel stud replaced. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. This is Tom, your Frugal Prepper.